Ladies and gentlemen, there is a silent struggle that many face but rarely speak about. It is the reality of a woman with no friends. Society may look at her and assume she is cold, unfriendly, or difficult. But the truth is, loneliness is not always a sign of failure. Sometimes it is an indicator of purpose. You see, a woman with no friends is not always alone. She is often in the process of becoming. She is in transition. She is in preparation. There are seasons in life where God will separate you, not to isolate you, but to elevate you. Sometimes He will strip away distractions, remove unnecessary voices, and position you in a place where you can hear Him clearly. Loneliness is often misunderstood. Many see it as a permanent condition, a painful reality that signals rejection or inadequacy. But in truth, loneliness is not a sentence. It is a season. It is a temporary phase in life that serves a greater purpose, if understood correctly. A woman who finds herself alone may question why relationships have faded, why friends have distanced themselves, or why she no longer fits into circles where she once belonged. It is easy to internalize this as a personal failure, but sometimes loneliness is not about loss. It is about transformation. Seasons change, and just as the leaves fall in autumn to make way for new growth in spring, there are times in life when certain relationships must fade for new opportunities and connections to emerge. During times of loneliness, a woman is often being prepared for something greater. There are moments when God will separate an individual not as punishment, but as preparation. Growth does not always happen in crowds. It often happens in quiet spaces, in solitude, in the moments where reflection and self-discovery take place. When distractions are removed, clarity is gained. A woman who is alone has an opportunity to hear her own thoughts, to examine her heart, and to develop a deeper understanding of her purpose. Many of the greatest women in history had to walk through seasons of loneliness before stepping into their divine assignments. Esther was taken from her familiar surroundings and placed in a palace where she had no friends, no family, and no certainty about her future. Yet in that season of isolation, she was being positioned for something greater. Ruth walked away from everything she knew, leaving behind her homeland, her past, and the comfort of familiarity. But in her journey of solitude, she stepped into a destiny she never could have imagined. Even Mary, the mother of Jesus, carried a promise that no one else could fully understand. She bore a vision so great that it set her apart from everyone around her. Their loneliness was not a sign of abandonment. It was an indication of purpose. A woman who finds herself alone should not be discouraged. Instead of viewing loneliness as a curse, she must recognize it as a divine setup. Sometimes God removes people not because something is wrong, but because something greater is coming. Some friendships were only meant for a season. They serve their purpose and must be released so that new relationships aligned with one's destiny can emerge. Loneliness can also be a time of personal refinement. It is in solitude that a woman can truly invest in herself, develop new skills, deepen her faith, and cultivate her vision. Without the noise of unnecessary conversations and unproductive relationships, she can focus on what truly matters. Instead of mourning what is lost, she can embrace what is being built within her. This season is an opportunity to strengthen her character, to increase her wisdom, and to prepare for the doors that will eventually open. One of the greatest deceptions is believing that being alone means being unloved. But love is not measured by the number of friends one has. It is measured by the quality of one's relationship with God, oneself, and those who truly matter. A woman must understand that her value is not determined by who stands beside her, but by who she is when she stands alone. There will come a time when this season will pass. Just as winter makes way for spring, loneliness will make way for divine connections, meaningful friendships, and purposeful relationships. But for now, if a woman finds herself in a place of solitude, she must embrace it, knowing that this is not her final destination. It is simply preparation for the next chapter of her life. Separation is never easy. When a woman finds herself removed from familiar environments, distanced from people she once relied on, or forced into a season of solitude, she may question why it is happening. It is natural to resist separation because human beings crave connection, familiarity, and comfort. However, what may feel like rejection is often divine redirection. God does not separate without a purpose. He removes certain things to make room for something greater. Separation is a process of refinement. Gold is not purified in comfort, it is purified through fire. Likewise, a woman who is being prepared for something significant must go through seasons where she is stripped of distractions, unnecessary relationships, and limiting attachment. God does not elevate without first refining, and refinement requires separation. When a person is surrounded by too many voices, it becomes difficult to hear the one voice that truly matters. Sometimes God has to pull someone away so they can hear clearly, grow fully, and step into the next level of their calling. Throughout history, some of the most influential people experienced divine separation before they were elevated. Joseph was separated from his family, betrayed by his brothers, and placed in isolation before he stepped into his destiny as a ruler in Egypt. Moses was taken from the palace and sent into the wilderness before he became a great leader. Even Jesus had moments of separation, withdrawing from crowds to pray, seeking solitude to prepare for his purpose. These moments were not signs of failure, but indicators of elevation. A woman must understand that when God pulls her away from certain people, places, or situations, it is not to diminish her, but to develop her. Elevation requires letting go. Not every friendship is meant to last forever. Not every relationship is aligned with the future God has planned. There are times when certain connections must end because they are tied to a season that is no longer relevant. A woman who clings to the past may find herself hindered from stepping into the future. Just as a seed must be buried alone before it grows into a tree, there are times when a person must endure a season of separation before experiencing elevation. Separation also brings transformation. A woman who is set apart has an opportunity to discover who she truly is without external influences. She can focus on developing her gifts, deepening her faith, and strengthening her character. Growth happens in the unseen places, in the quiet moments when no one is watching. Many want the benefits of elevation without enduring the process of separation, but true promotion comes after preparation. The higher the building, the deeper the foundation. Likewise, the greater the calling, the more intense the process of refinement. One of the greatest challenges of separation is trusting the process. It is easy to feel abandoned, misunderstood, or forgotten when going through a season of isolation. But God does not separate to harm, He separates to prepare. A woman must resist the urge to reconnect with what God has already removed. If something was taken away, it was for a reason. If a door was closed, it was intentional. What is ahead is far greater than what was left behind. The discomfort of separation is temporary, but the reward of obedience is eternal. Those who endure the process will see the fruit of their faithfulness. In time, clarity will come. The purpose behind the separation will be revealed. And when that moment arrives, a woman will realize that everything she lost was making room for everything she was meant to gain. What once felt like isolation will be recognized as divine positioning. She was not being left behind, she was being lifted higher. Isolation has been a defining element in the lives of some of the most influential figures in history. Time and again, those who were destined for greatness found themselves pulled away from the familiar, placed in solitude, and stripped of the comforts of companionship. Though it may seem like a painful process, isolation is often a necessary step toward purpose. It is in these quiet moments away from distractions that individuals are refined, strengthened, and prepared for the call on their lives. One of the most powerful examples of isolation leading to purpose is Joseph. He was separated from his family, thrown into a pit by his own brothers, and sold into slavery. What seemed like a betrayal was actually divine positioning. Joseph found himself imprisoned, alone, and forgotten by those who once knew him. But it was in that very place of isolation that he developed the wisdom, patience, and leadership skills that would one day elevate him to the highest position in Egypt. If Joseph had remained in the comfort of his home, he would have never stepped into his destiny. His isolation was not the end of his story, it was the beginning of his transformation. Moses also experienced divine separation before fulfilling his purpose. In Pharaoh's palace, he had access to power, wealth, and influence. Yet, after killing an Egyptian in defense of his people, he was forced to flee into the wilderness. For 40 years, he lived in obscurity, tending sheep in a foreign land. It would have been easy to believe that his best years were behind him. But it was in the solitude of the wilderness that Moses encountered God through the burning bush. His isolation was not a punishment, it was preparation. When the time was right, he returned to Egypt, not as a prince, but as a deliverer, ready to lead his people to freedom. Without his years in the wilderness, Moses would not have been prepared for the weight of his calling. Another example is Esther. She was taken from her home, removed from everything she knew, and placed in a palace where she had no friends, no family, and no certainty about her future. Though she had been separated from her past, she had also been positioned for purpose. When the Jewish people were threatened with destruction, it was Esther's position in the palace that allowed her to intercede on their behalf. Had she remained in her familiar surroundings, she would have never been in the right place at the right time to fulfill her calling. Her isolation was not a sign of rejection, but a setup for elevation. Even Jesus himself experienced seasons of isolation. Before he began his ministry, he spent 40 days alone in the wilderness, fasting and facing temptation. It was in this time of solitude that he gained spiritual strength and clarity for the mission ahead. Throughout his ministry, he frequently withdrew from the crowds to pray, seeking moments of solitude to commune with the Father. In the final hours before his crucifixion, he prayed alone in the Garden of Gethsemane, preparing himself for the ultimate sacrifice. His moments of isolation were never wasted. They were necessary steps toward fulfilling his divine purpose. History proves that isolation is not an indicator of failure, but often a sign of preparation. Those who are called to greatness must go through seasons of separation. These moments are not meant to break them, but to build them, shaping them into the individuals they were destined to become. Though isolation may feel lonely, it is often the very tool that positions a person for impact, ensuring they are ready when their moment of purpose arrives. Rejection is one of the most painful experiences a person can go through. It can leave feelings of inadequacy, disappointment, and confusion. Whether it comes from people, opportunities, or situations, rejection often feels like a closed door, a sign that something was lost or taken away. But what many fail to realize is that rejection is not always meant to harm. Sometimes it is a divine redirection. What seems like a setback is often a setup for something greater. Throughout life, there are moments when things do not go as planned. A job opportunity is missed, a relationship ends, a friendship fades, or a dream seems out of reach. In those moments, it is easy to question why it happened. However, what looks like rejection is often God's way of moving a person towards something better. The end of one thing can be the beginning of something far greater. When a door closes, it is not always a loss. It is often. There are times when people pray for something they believe is best for them, but God in his wisdom sees the full picture and withholds it because he knows it will not serve their destiny. A perfect example of this is Joseph. He had a dream of greatness, yet his journey to fulfillment was filled with rejection. His own brothers despised him, sold him into slavery, and removed him from the comfort of his home. Later, he was falsely accused and imprisoned. At every stage, it seemed as if life was pushing him further from his dream. But in reality, each rejection was redirecting him closer to his destiny. Had his brothers not rejected him, he would never have gone to Egypt. Had he not been imprisoned, he would never have met the people who would introduce him to Pharaoh. What looked like rejection was actually redirection. In the end, Joseph was elevated to a position of great influence, saving not only Egypt, but also the very brothers who had betrayed him. Another example is Moses. He was raised in Pharaoh's palace, given the finest education and status, yet he was ultimately rejected from that life. Forced to flee to the wilderness, he lived in obscurity for decades. To an outsider, it may have seemed like his story had ended. But what looked like rejection was preparation for his true calling. If he had stayed in the palace, he would have never become the leader who freed his people from slavery. His rejection from Egypt led him directly into his divine assignment. Even Jesus himself experienced rejection. The very people he came to save turned against him. He was mocked, betrayed, and crucified by those he loved, but his rejection was the very thing that led to the fulfillment of his purpose. Had he been accepted by everyone, he would not have completed the mission of redemption. His suffering led to salvation for the world, proving that what looks like defeat is often the foundation for victory. Many people hold on to situations and relationships that are not meant for them. When rejection happens, they see it as failure instead of seeing it as a necessary shift. But sometimes the things that leave are the very things that were never meant to stay. A person who trusts in God's plan must learn to see rejection as a redirection towards something better. There is a bigger picture, a greater purpose, and a divine plan at work. What seems like an ending is often the first step toward a new beginning. Every closed door leads to an open one. Every disappointment is an opportunity for growth. When rejection comes, instead of mourning what is lost, it is important to trust that something better is ahead. Friendships are one of life's greatest gifts. They provide companionship, support, and shared experiences. But not all friendships are meant to last forever. Some are only for a season, serving a purpose in one stage of life, but not necessarily in the next. It is natural to want to hold on to every relationship, especially those that have brought joy and comfort. But there comes a time when certain connections must be released in order to grow into the future that awaits. As people evolve, their purpose becomes clearer and their journey takes on new directions. When this happens, not everyone can come along. Some friendships were built on shared struggles, mutual interests, or convenience rather than alignment with destiny. When a person begins to outgrow certain mindsets or step into new opportunities, they may notice that some friendships no longer feel the same. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly may become strained. Activities that once felt enjoyable may start to feel out of place. This does not mean that the other person is bad. It simply means that their role in the journey has ended. A perfect example of this can be seen in the story of Abraham and Lot. Abraham was called by God to leave his homeland and go to a place that was unknown. Lot, his nephew, accompanied him on the journey. But as they grew in wealth and influence, tension arose between them. Their herdsmen quarreled, and it became clear that they could no longer stay together. At that moment, Abraham had to make a difficult decision. Instead of forcing the relationship to continue, he allowed Lot to choose his own path, and they separated. After Lot left, God revealed to Abraham the full extent of the promise he had for him. The separation was necessary for the next stage of his life. Had he held on to Lot out of loyalty, he might have delayed or even forfeited the greater plan that was ahead. Some friendships are only designed to last for a particular season. There are people who are assigned to help in one stage of life, but are not meant to journey all the way to the destination. Holding on to relationships that have expired can create unnecessary weight, slowing down progress. This is why pruning is necessary. Just as a gardener trims branches to help a tree grow stronger, there are times when friendships must be pruned so that a person can flourish. Growth requires space, and sometimes space can only be created when certain people are no longer present. There are also friendships that become harmful over time. Some relationships start as sources of encouragement, but later become sources of distraction. A person who is trying to move forward cannot afford to be surrounded by individuals who constantly pull them backward. If a friendship does not inspire growth, if it does not align with values and purpose, it may be time to evaluate whether it should continue. It is not a sign of arrogance to outgrow relationships. It is a sign of progress. Letting go of certain friendships does not mean forgetting the good times or failing to appreciate what those people once contributed. It simply means recognizing that every relationship has a purpose, and when that purpose is fulfilled, it is okay to move forward. Not everyone will understand the journey, and not everyone is meant to. Trying to hold on to relationships that no longer fit can cause unnecessary frustration. Instead of forcing friendships that have run their course, it is better to release them with gratitude and embrace the new connections that will align with the future. When a person fully steps into their calling, they will find that the right people will come into their life at the right time. New friendships will form, ones that support, uplift, and align with the path ahead. Those who are meant to stay will stay, and those who are meant to go must be released. Trusting this process allows for greater growth, deeper peace, and a life that is aligned with destiny. Solitude is often misunderstood. Many people associate being alone with loneliness, but solitude is not a state of emptiness. It is an opportunity for growth. It is in moments of solitude that a person can reflect, develop, and prepare for what is ahead. Instead of fearing isolation, one should embrace it as a season of transformation. Growth requires focus, and focus is difficult to maintain when constantly surrounded by noise, distractions, and the opinions of others. When a person is alone, they have the ability to hear their own thoughts more clearly. They can evaluate their life, recognize patterns, and make intentional decisions about the future. Solitude provides space for self-discovery. It allows a person to understand who they truly are outside of external influences. Many people shape their identities based on their environment, friendships, or social circles, but when those influences are removed, they have the chance to develop their own values, beliefs, and vision. Great leaders, thinkers, and innovators have often spent time in solitude before stepping into their purpose. Moses spent years in the wilderness before leading his people. Jesus withdrew from the crowds to pray and gain strength for his mission. Even historical figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela had periods of solitude where they reflected, planned, and prepared for the impact they would later make. Solitude is not a punishment. It is a process that strengthens a person for greater things. One of the greatest benefits of solitude is the ability to cultivate a deeper relationship with God. When life is busy and filled with noise, it becomes difficult to hear His voice. In solitude, a person can pray without distraction, meditate on truth, and gain clarity about their purpose. It is in these quiet moments that revelations come, new ideas are birthed, and vision becomes clearer. Many of the greatest breakthroughs in life come when a person steps away from the crowd and spends time alone with God. Solitude also provides an opportunity for personal development. It is a time to invest in learning, growing, and improving in areas that will contribute to future success. A person who finds themselves in a season of isolation should not waste it on frustration or self-pity, but should use it wisely. Reading, studying, developing new skills, and working toward personal goals are all ways to maximize the benefits of solitude. Instead of seeing it as a season of waiting, it should be seen as a season of preparation. Those who use solitude wisely will emerge stronger, wiser, and more equipped for the next stage of their journey. Another powerful aspect of solitude is emotional healing. When constantly surrounded by people and responsibilities, it is easy to suppress emotions and avoid dealing with past wounds. Solitude creates the space to process experiences, heal from pain, and release burdens that may have been carried for years. It is an opportunity to reset mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Those who embrace solitude often come out of it with renewed strength and a clearer sense of direction. There is a difference between solitude and isolation. Solitude is chosen and used for growth, while isolation is often the result of avoidance or fear. A person who intentionally seeks solitude does so with purpose, knowing that it is a time to build, reflect, and strengthen. When this time is used correctly, it becomes a foundation for success. Every great achievement starts in a place of preparation, and solitude is the perfect environment for that preparation to take place. Seasons of solitude will not last forever, but they are essential. Those who embrace them with the right mindset will emerge ready for the opportunities and challenges ahead. Instead of resisting solitude, one should see it as a divine gift, an opportunity to grow into the person they were created to be. Life is a journey, and along the way people will come and go. Some relationships last for a lifetime, while others are only meant for a season. It can be painful when friendships fade, connections break, or relationships end unexpectedly. In those moments, it is easy to feel alone and wonder if the right people will ever come. But God, in His wisdom, knows exactly who belongs in each season of life. He is not careless with connections. Every person who enters or exits a life does so according to divine timing. When the time is right, God will send the right people. There is a tendency to chase after relationships, fearing that if they are lost, nothing better will come. But when God removes someone, it is not to leave a person empty. It is to make room for someone better suited for the journey ahead. It is important to trust that what is meant to stay will stay, and what is meant to leave must go. The right people will never require force to remain. When a person learns to let go of what is not meant for them, they make space for what is truly aligned with their purpose. Abraham experienced this in his journey. When he followed God's call to leave his homeland, he had to separate from many familiar faces. Even Lot, his own nephew, could not continue with him indefinitely. At a certain point, they had to part ways. But after Lot left, God revealed even greater promises to Abraham. This shows that sometimes certain people must leave before God can fully unveil what He has in store. If Abraham had insisted on keeping Lot by his side, he might have delayed his destiny. There are times when a person may feel isolated, longing for meaningful connections. It can be difficult to watch others surrounded by friends and supporters while walking alone. But solitude is often a sign of preparation. God does not introduce the right people until a person is ready to receive them. Rushing ahead and forming connections prematurely can lead to distractions, delays, or unnecessary pain. Some relationships, though well-intended, may not be beneficial. That is why patience is essential. Waiting on God's timing ensures that the relationships formed will be fruitful, meaningful, and aligned with His plan. David is another example of divine connections at the right time. Before he became king, he was anointed while still tending sheep, unnoticed by most. But at the right time, God sent Jonathan, a friend who strengthened and encouraged him. Later, God connected David with mighty warriors who helped him fulfill his destiny. These relationships were not random, they were divinely appointed. Had David forced friendships outside of God's plan, he might have found himself surrounded by people who could not truly support his calling. Many times people hold on to the wrong relationships out of fear that they will not find better ones. But God is never limited. He is able to provide the right friendships, mentors, and partners at exactly the right moment. Instead of chasing connections, it is better to focus on personal growth, deepening faith, and preparing for what is to come. The right people will arrive when the season is right, and they will bring value, purpose, and alignment. When God sends the right people, the connection will be effortless. There will be mutual support, encouragement, and shared vision. These relationships will not drain but will strengthen. They will not distract but will push forward. Trusting in divine timing means believing that there is no need to manipulate or force anything. What is meant to be will come, and when it does, it will be far better than anything that was lost. Walking alone is one of the most difficult yet necessary experiences in life. There are moments when no one seems to understand the journey, when familiar faces disappear, and when the road ahead feels uncertain. It is in these times of solitude that true strength, clarity, and purpose are developed. While companionship is valuable, there are seasons when separation is required in order to grow into the person one is meant to be. Many people fear being alone because society often equates it with loneliness or failure. But walking alone is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of preparation. Those who are called to greater things often find themselves walking a path that others cannot follow. This is because growth requires a certain level of isolation. When there are too many voices, too many opinions, and too many distractions, it becomes difficult to focus on what truly matters. Walking alone eliminates external noise and allows a person to hear more clearly, think more deeply, and move with intention. Throughout history, great leaders, visionaries, and pioneers have had to walk alone. Before stepping into their calling, Joseph was separated from his family and went through years of hardship before stepping into his destiny. Moses spent decades in the wilderness before leading his people to freedom. David spent time alone tending sheep before becoming king. Even Jesus often withdrew to solitary places to pray and seek strength. Their isolation was not a punishment, it was a time of preparation. Had they not walked alone, they would not have been ready for the responsibility that lay ahead. Walking alone also reveals who truly belongs in one's life. When everything is going well, many people surround and celebrate success. But when difficulties arise, when tough decisions must be made, and when growth requires sacrifice, not everyone will remain. Some friendships are seasonal. And when the season changes, those who were not meant for the next phase will drift away. This can be painful, but it is necessary. The wrong people can slow progress, introduce doubt, or lead away from purpose. Walking alone helps identify those who are truly meant to be part of the journey. There is also a certain freedom that comes with solitude. Without the influence of others, there is room for self-discovery. It becomes easier to understand personal strengths, weaknesses, and passions. Many people spend their lives following the expectations of others, never fully embracing their true identity. But walking alone forces a person to rely on their own wisdom, their own faith, and their own convictions. It builds confidence and independence, ensuring that future decisions are made with clarity rather than pressure. One of the greatest benefits of walking alone is spiritual growth. When there are no distractions, it becomes easier to connect with God, to hear His voice, and to trust His direction. Many people avoid solitude because they are afraid of facing themselves or dealing with past wounds. But solitude is often where healing takes place. It is where God reveals deeper truths, strengthens character, and prepares a person for what is ahead. The moments of walking alone are never wasted. They are moments of refinement and transformation. Although walking alone is sometimes necessary, it does not last forever. It is simply a season, a time of growth before greater things come. Those who embrace it rather than resist it will emerge stronger, wiser, and more prepared for the future. When the time is right, the right people, the right opportunities, and the right doors will open. But until then, walking alone should be seen not as a burden, but as a gift. A chance to develop into the person who is truly ready for what lies ahead.